society. And whereas the Relay for Life involved nursing students, faculty, and community teams walking laps in the school's gymnasium from 7 p.m. Friday, March 18th to Saturday, March 19th at 7 a.m. Therefore, be it resolved that all MLAs of this House applaud the significant fundraising achievements accomplished by the St. FX Nursing School students and its faculty, while commending all those individuals who were so kind with financial donations. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Minister of Environment and Labour has announced the new regulations and 6 new classifications for video games rented or sold in this province. And whereas these new rules will allow parents to make informed choices about the games they rent or buy for their children. And whereas these new rules are the direct result of an opposition bill presented by the member from Dartmouth East. Therefore, be it resolved that this House recognize the good policy outcomes that benefit Nova Scotia families when they result from listening to the ideas of the official opposition and the member from Dartmouth East. I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Here no. Notice is tabled. Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Education on the resolution.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I should move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Peter Millman, a grade 5 student at Douglas Street Elementary School in Truro, was one of 11 winners of the Matthew DaCosta Challenge Awards. Whereas the Matthew DaCosta Challenge Awards result from a Canada-wide competition and are presented annually in Ottawa to 11 students aged 9 to 18. And whereas Peter Millman was recognized for his 2,500 tile mosaic of Josiah Henson, an American slave whose escape to Canada inspired the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Peter Millman on receiving the Matthew DaCosta Challenge Award and wish him continued success in his educational pursuits. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll ask for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a reliable, efficient Metro Transit service is vital to the residents along the St. Margaret's Bay Road in the communities of Hubli, Lewis Lake, and Upper Tantallon, and whereas Maureen Sear of Hubli has collected a petition urging HRM officials to address this need, and whereas Ms. Sear continues to press for a quality transit service that will meet the needs of our growing community, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature recognize Maureen Sear for her initiative and urge the HRM to provide a quality transit service to these residents. I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers. Is that agreed? Agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Victorian Order of Nurses, referenced as VON, received its royal charter in November 1897 as a charity guided by the principles of primary health care, addressing community health and social needs. And whereas the VON, a national registered charity, addresses health needs of people in Canada through services provided by nurses, other health professionals, support service workers, and volunteers. And whereas in 2005, the VON is celebrating 100 years of service in Cape Breton. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of the House of Assembly acknowledge the dedicated team of nurses, other health professionals, support service workers, and volunteers of the VON in Cape Breton and congratulate the VON for its 100 years of service in Cape Breton. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Sackville Flyers won the Kent Cup Challenge Adam AAA Hockey Championship in Moncton in early December, and whereas Andrew Arthur, head coach, along with Len Boudreau, Mark Monroe, and Dale Kaiser, assistant coaches, worked and continue to work with the team to improve their hockey skills and to teach them how to be team players, and whereas this is a team of bright young boys with bright futures ahead, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House join me in sending along congratulations to the Sackville Flyers Adam AAA hockey team and to the coaching staff. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Any further resolutions? Orders of the day or question period begin at 2:05 and end at 3:05. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. The Finance Minister has just said that for most Nova Scotians, today is just like any other day. And, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, that is all too true. The budget that has just been delivered by this government is, I have to say, uninspiring. It fails to point a clear direction, a clear path to achieving a better deal for Nova Scotia families. Now, there was much talk, Mr. Speaker, about this being an education budget, and while there are certainly some long overdue investments in school nutrition, in children with special needs, the overall increase for the Education Department is barely half that of the other departments. So, Mr. Speaker, my question for the Premier is a simple one. Where is the vision that you promised the people of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the question. It gives me an opportunity to say to all members of the House and through them to all Nova Scotians that the government has put the focus on education. We believe, and we are still researching it, that this is the single largest increase in the investment in education in the history of the province. And simply put, Mr. Speaker, the changes that were brought to the attention of members of the House and to all Nova Scotians today in the budget address will start a change in the way in which all of us look at education and will start to improve those results that all of us want to achieve.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest to the Premier, with the greatest respect, of course, that the vision that he outlines is a very blurry one. 4 years ago, education made up a greater percentage of the budget than it does today. 2 years ago, Mr. Speaker, the report of the Special Education Implementation Review Committee called for an immediate injection of $20 million, and that was simply to catch up. This year, we have heard about the thousands of children languishing on wait lists for access to assessment and assistance. Will the Premier explain to Nova Scotians why it is that he refuses to listen to the expert advice about helping children with special needs?
Good question. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the Leader of the Opposition suggested that the government should spend more in education. Now, if the member opposite really believes that the government should readjust its priorities and increase its spending on education, then I think it's incumbent on the Leader of the Opposition to tell us, do we take the additional money out of the health budget? Do we take it out of the infrastructure budget? Do we take it out of the budget of community services? Where do we get the additional money?
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Premier is right. It underlines the difference between this party and that party, and that we would not take that money to fund big insurance companies. We wouldn't. That's what we would not do. We would invest we would invest in the children of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Too many children in our high schools feel that the opportunities available to them don't match up with their interests and don't offer them the choices they seek. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that you know access to vocational and trades training in our high schools is a crucial factor in meeting the looming skills shortages the province faces. And today we heard that only at-risk students will be given those opportunities. So my question for the Premier is, can he explain to this House why this government is choosing to limit access to such a needed form of education and training for so many Nova Scotia students?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as the Leader of the Opposition pointed out, the government has recognized there are too many dropouts in the public school system in Nova Scotia. There are too many students who are not achieving academically, who, with a proper program, can, through a program we're calling Options and Opportunities, access the talents and the skills to then move on to the community college system. An opportunity that without this program would not be there for them.
The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, today we have a budget of excuses. Excuses for the last 5 years of neglect of our children's education. Excuses for the last 5 years of losing focus on the issues in our healthcare system. Excuses for the Premier breaking his word by adding to our debt over the past 5 years. Mr. Premier, Nova Scotians are tired of your excuses. My question today is, after 5 years of governing, you now receive $1.8 billion more in yearly revenue than you did in 1999. How can you justify tabling a budget that will add $90 million to our province's debt?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And one of the challenges that we faced back in 1999 was coming into office with the province each year spending over $500 million more than it took in. It was a long and difficult road to get us to where we are today, in which we could table a balanced budget, we would have a debt management program, we would spend more for health, more for education, more for community services, and more to the other departments. It was a long and difficult road, Mr. Speaker, but we have managed to get there.
Order. Order, please. Just want to remind the honourable members that no specific budgetary questions are allowed. Certainly general questions around the expenditure of the government or the philosophy of government, but not specific government budget questions. Thank you. The honourable member for Richmond on your first supplement.
You know, Mr. Speaker, in his history lessons, it's too bad the Premier doesn't remind Nova Scotians of what was inherited by a Liberal government in 1993 after John Buchanan's reign, that your own Deputy Premier was a proud member of back in those days. Mr. Speaker, it's too bad your history doesn't go back that far, Mr. Premier. Mr. Speaker, the Premier wanted the budget address to review his time in office. Well, let's review some of his time. Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Richmond has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, we can all remember that this was the same Premier who told Nova Scotians in 1999 he could fix health care for $46 million. With this budget, he has now put in an additional $1 billion in health care with no end in sight and no plan in sight. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians were told the Premier would provide a quality education system, yet today's commitment either keeps us in 10th place or at best we now move to 9th place in the country on a per-student funding. So my question is, how much more money does this Premier need before he can give Nova Scotians a quality education system as promised?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the government is pleased that some of the changes we made in the curriculum in the earlier grades are starting, in fact, to influence test scoring, and the recent literacy marks that were achieved are improving. We have made basic changes in the public school system, particularly in the earlier grades, and as those young people move through the system, the standardized testing that will be part of the public school system in the province of Nova Scotia heretofore will start to improve, proving that starting early, starting with the young people, improving the curriculum will work. Mr. Speaker, All of these things don't cost a lot of money. They are sensible things, and we will work with school boards and teachers to improve the results in the public school system.
The honourable member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
That's right, Mr. Speaker. I forgot because this government has a Deputy Minister of Education who says more money in education doesn't mean better education. So I guess that same philosophy applies with the government. Speaker, in 1999, the Premier told Nova Scotians that he would not mortgage his grandchildren's future by adding to the provincial debt. Yet he has done so in the past, and he has tabled a budget today where he will do so again, despite Nova Scotia's economy being strong and despite record transfers from Ottawa. So my question to the Premier is, how can you stand in front of Nova Scotians today and table what you call a balanced budget, a provincial surplus, and yet at the end of the day, you have once again added to the debt of this province?
Hear, hear.
The honourable Premier.
The province of Nova Scotia has adopted the GAP principles in accounting, and the province of Nova Scotia follows those to the T. And Mr. Speaker, you know, it's interesting. I mean, either we're going to have GAP and we are going to follow GAP and we're going to have GAP accepted, or we're not. But you know, it's interesting. The bond rating agencies, 3 of them, have upgraded the credit rating of the province of Nova Scotia. In one case, in the first time in the history of that rating agency, they ever increased our rating. Mr. Speaker, if you look at it from an objective point of view, we are moving forward, and we are moving forward significantly.
Hear, hear. The honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, my question will be for the Premier. You know, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia families are in many cases still struggling to make ends meet. With a minimum wage that is among the lowest in the country, increasing costs for home heating, electricity, and many other essentials, family budgets are growing tighter each day. Instead of providing or seeking to provide some relief to those families by removing the HST from the essentials of life, the government chose a different direction. Today, they have now announced a large corporation tax cut that will cost at least $24 million a year when fully implemented, Mr. Speaker. So my question is for the Premier, why has his government chosen tax cuts for insurance companies and other large corporations rather than HST relief for ordinary Nova Scotians?
Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. One of the easiest ways that government can provide money for essential services is by growing the economy. And we've been very successful. The Minister of Finance reminded us today that 38,000 jobs have been created in Nova Scotia since 1999, 10,000 in the last year. You know, the best social program is jobs, Mr. Speaker, and being competitive creates jobs.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, you know what, Mr. Speaker, the Premier is correct about only one thing, and that's about priorities, because in this case, the priorities of the government are so out of whack with the priorities of other Nova Scotians. The Premier promised to increase the personal use allowance. Here's an example, Mr. Speaker. Promised to increase the personal use allowance for long-term care residents, but they have to wait until 2006 for a $10 increase. He did not, on the other hand, promise large corporations a tax cut. In fact, John Hand's blueprint for building a better Nova Scotia only talked about tax cut for small businesses. Yet the large corporation tax cut will start 6 months before long-term care residents will get their $10, Mr. Speaker. So my question for the Premier is this: why is it that a tax cut for large insurance companies and other corporations are more important to you than a better deal for seniors and their families?
Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the last year, more Nova Scotians have gone to work and received a paycheck than ever before in the history of this province. This government believes that it has a challenge ahead. There are some 38,000 Nova Scotians that are still registered that haven't got a job. And this government, Mr. Speaker, will not rest until we find employment opportunities for every one of those 38,000 Nova Scotians, and we will do that by being competitive.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Well, I'm not sure if the Premier is indicating he's going to put seniors in nursing homes to work, Mr. Speaker. Is that a new policy of the province of Nova Scotia? Sounds like it. You know who generates the most jobs in this province? It's actually small business, Mr. Speaker. But it's the large corporations in Nova Scotia that the government is going to give a 33% tax break to, in addition to the benefit that large corporations will also receive from the small business tax break, because they get to take advantage of it as well. This includes insurance companies that had been raking in record profits, $4.1 billion last year, Mr. Speaker. So my question is this: why is this the moment that your government chose to give tax cuts that weren't among your hundreds of promises?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I care about the jobs that large corporations create. I care about the jobs at Michelin. I care about the jobs at Trenton Works. I care about the jobs that are all over this province that are a result of the competitive environment we have here in Nova Scotia. These corporations, Mr. Speaker, will not be here unless we are competitive. And we are not going to take advice that will drive these employers away. Hear, hear.
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, the budget table today presumes the passage of the $830 million Atlantic Accord sometime before April 2006. Mr. Speaker, when we introduced a resolution last week calling on all political parties to pass the federal budget so Nova Scotians could get the immediate benefits of the accord, the government members voted it down. Mr. Speaker, the Premier later tabled a letter dated April 11th from Stephen Harper establishing his commitment to the accord. Based on the fact that the Premier has added the benefits of the accord into financial projections for our province, even though it has yet to be passed, can the Premier inform the House when he last spoke to Stephen Harper about the ultimate passage of the Atlantic Accord?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Speaker, the letter I received from Mr. Harper, I think I have a copy here, was dated
15 days ago.
April the 11th. The leader of the third party is correct. It was April the 11th. I had a conversation with Mr. Harper around that particular time. I don't remember the exact date.
The Honourable Member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Well, it's good. It's good to see that they keep in regular contact, Mr. Speaker. I guess he's not on speed dial. Mr. Speaker, the Premier admitted that our province is losing $1 million a week, each week that this accord is not passed. $1 million a week could go towards university tuition, seniors programs, more doctors, or even more paving. Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Danny Williams said he wants the accord passed before any election is called so that his province can enjoy the benefits of the accord immediately. So my question is why will the Premier not demand the Atlantic Accord be passed before any possible election? Or is he once again hoping Danny Williams will do all the heavy lifting for him?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I can remind Nova Scotians that the accord passage is contained in the Implementation Act that the Government of Canada has tabled. If the member opposite is really serious about having that act passed, he could get in touch with the Government of Canada and ask them to put it on the order paper, because they've taken it off the order paper in Ottawa.
Yes.
The Honourable Member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this Premier had an opportunity to show leadership on behalf of Nova Scotians, to demand from Stephen Harper passage of this budget before any election, to do what Danny Williams has done for his province in demanding that they get the benefits immediately. I ask the Premier once again, why do you sit by quietly while Nova Scotians are losing what you've termed to be $1 million a week while this accord is not being passed up in Ottawa.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the leader of the third party, the House Leader of the third party, is very correct. The more quickly that the Budget Implementation Act is passed in Ottawa, the better it would be for Nova Scotians, to the tune of almost $1 million a week. But, Mr. Speaker, it can't pass if it's not on the order paper in Ottawa. So maybe the member opposite would use his influence to get it back on the order paper so there can be a vote.
Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. Pursuing a post-secondary education in Nova Scotia is no longer a choice for many students. It is essential for them to compete in an increasingly tight job market to provide for themselves and for their families, Mr. Speaker. What we as a province need to do is to support these students to eliminate as many barriers as possible. Nova Scotia has the highest tuition fees in the country, more than $1,800 higher than the national average. Students are graduating with more than $25,000 in debt. This government got rid of the debt reduction program and as of today have put back only 2/3 of that money. So my question is this, Mr. Speaker, why is the government still doing so little to ease the debt burden for Nova Scotia students? Good question.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I would use this opportunity to remind members of the House of the debt reduction plan that is in place for the provincial part of the student loan debt that our students have in this province. And with the current program that we have in place, students who remain in the province and make regular payments, they have 40% of their provincial debt forgiven. And I will remind members of the House that it is a third-year blueprint commitment that we will increase two aspects of that loan remission program next year that will increase the loan forgiveness for Nova Scotia students to 50%.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, despite what the Premier says, this government's policies will force up tuition by another 12% over the next 3 years. Now, Mr. Speaker, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Newfoundland and Labrador have all frozen fees for this year. Those governments recognize that post-secondary education is no longer affordable for too many families. Those provinces, Mr. Speaker, have acted. Yet the Conservative government here remains unrepentant about their failure to meaningfully reduce the barriers to post-secondary education. So my question is this. Will the Premier tell the House when his government will realize that his sky-high tuition fees are a real barrier for many talented young Nova Scotians?
Honourable Premier.
The government, Mr. Speaker, is very aware of the increasing fees, particularly fees to go to university in the province of Nova Scotia. However, we still have, despite all of that, we have our students going to university in record numbers. Highest percentage of high school graduates in the country go to university in the province of Nova Scotia. We have signed a memorandum of understanding with the universities to slow the increase in tuition fees. But, Mr. Speaker, the reason the government is not amenable to arguments that result in a freeze is that it would simply result in a dilution of the very good programs that Nova Scotia universities provide for their student attendees. It would dilute the product, Mr. Speaker, and that is counterproductive.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier is fundamentally misinformed. Fundamentally misinformed. The government today has talked a lot about the deficits that we face in infrastructure. One of the groups who understand this problem all too well, Mr. Speaker, is our universities. Right. The facilities that our students learn in some cases, are virtually ready to fall down around them. At the current rate, it will take nearly 200 years to deal with the deferred maintenance on our campuses. So my question for the government, for the Premier, is this. Why is your government refusing to make the needed infrastructure investments in our campuses?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite is particularly good at identifying problems. The government is in the business of solving the problems, and I think we have made a start. We have indicated very clearly in the budget that was just tabled a couple of hours ago in this House that we are making education at all levels our priority. It will take a series of steps to climb the ladder, Mr. Speaker, but we will climb the ladder.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Halifax-Shabakdale.
To the Minister responsible for immigration, Mr. Speaker, after years of being prompted, the government has finally taken some limited action to promote the attraction and retention of immigrants and refugees to Nova Scotia. But members of this House will know that many well-qualified professionals whose education and experience were gained in other countries are encountering difficulties in having that education and experience recognized in Nova Scotia. Will the Minister responsible for immigration tell us what his government is doing to create a better system for the evaluation of foreign credentials?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the member raises a good point, and it's a point that many people raised during the consultation phase in the fall. It's certainly something which many immigrants coming to our province face, not only in our province, but indeed across the country, Mr. Speaker. I'll use one such example, Mr. Speaker. We're working very closely with the Department of Health, with the Medical Society, with respect to that avenue, with respect to credentials. Mr. Speaker, that is one area where we're working very closely, and we should have some news later this spring.
The honourable member for Halifax-Shabakdale on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. It's not just physicians, it's engineers, and it's nurses, and it's dentists, and it's teachers. I have a school teacher, in fact, in my constituency who has worked in the UK. He's taught in the UK, and he can't get his qualifications recognized in Nova Scotia. Now look, there's clearly a problem. What I'd like to know is, will the minister take the lead and work to convene panels of professional certifying bodies for all the provinces to get on with working out a uniform approach across the country? Will he take the lead in doing that?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, we are already taking part of a strategy with respect to a national framework, Mr. Speaker, for immigration, and taking a look at the very types of initiatives that the member has indicated here today.
The honourable member for Halifax-Shabakdale on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, if the government is serious about wanting to increase the attraction and retention of immigrants and refugees to our province, which has been so far behind in this, and knowing that nonetheless the national negotiations might take some time, is the minister prepared to convene meetings now with all of Nova Scotia's certifying bodies for the various professions to start tackling the problem right now for our province, Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure the member that those types of discussions have already started with a variety of associations, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is when individuals do come here to our province, it's important that not only those that they be appropriately recognized for their appropriate field, and also, Mr. Speaker, that we have in place a process that provides them the opportunity to have their skills recognized, Mr. Speaker, but also to have them evaluated, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. And, Mr. Speaker, that's vital if we're to crack the challenge that's ahead of us with respect to immigrants and the challenges they face.
You recognize the honourable member for Halifax-Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Premier. Today in the House, the Premier has boasted that this is the biggest increase in education spending in a single year, and I believe he said the same outside of the House. Well, I would like to mention and bring forward information about June of 1998. At that time, and I will read you just the first sentence here, it says the provincial government is making an unprecedented investment in children in education. The bottom line for school boards shows an $82.3 million increase in provincial funding in a single year. There. This is clearly, Mr. Speaker, this amount is clearly higher than the $53.7 million promised for public education in this budget. So my question to the Premier is, how can the Premier mislead the House so blatantly?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will go back to my original remarks and looking at the record investment in infrastructure in our schools in this province, looking at the record investment in the community college system, looking at the record investment in our universities through the Memorandum of Understanding, and looking at the very significant increase in the funding of the school boards for the upcoming year. Mr. Speaker, if you look at all of those numbers, this is a record investment.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I look forward to the Premier providing that information to us, because I don't believe that it will be a record investment when you consider that for the school boards alone, this budget had included in 1998 $82.3 million for the school boards themselves. There were also new schools being built, and the capital budget is not at question here today. So again, I ask how the Minister or the Premier can be so blatant in bringing forth the figure that this is the biggest, most unprecedented increase in spending, when in fact it is not, and when in fact more bold things have been provided.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We seem to be getting into a bit of a budget debate, but I'll remind the member opposite of something that occurred when she wasn't in the House, but it was back in the mid-1990s when the government of the day reduced university funding to $175 million a day. Each year of our mandate, we have increased university funding, and as a result of the Memorandum of Understanding, we will, 4 years from now, have increased by $34 million the investment in universities compared to last year. A very significant improvement, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I think the Premier's given us an opening to ask about the Buchanan years and the bad and terrible condition of the budgets at that time. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, the province
was on life support then.
Order, please. Order, please. I'll member for Halifax Clayton Park on the final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the province was on life support in 1993 when the Liberals became government, and this government across the way is still digging out from that tremendous draining of the public purse. And you know. So, Mr. Premier, I would ask whether or not you agree with me that you are still digging out from the mess made by the Buchanan Tories. Still digging out now from the financial mess left by the Buchanan Tories.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Premier.
What I can say to the member opposite, I will answer to this House and I will answer to Nova Scotians. What has happened since 1999. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell all members of this House and I can say to all Nova Scotians, things are very much better in Nova Scotia today than they were in 1999. Hear, hear.
Order, please. The member for Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, maybe it's a good idea to turn to the present now. I'm sure I've heard recently that this government is committed to growing the economy and making it a business-friendly climate. High-speed internet access is one of those things that's an important and economic and educational advantage for communities that do have it. But some areas in Nova Scotia don't. It makes a big difference to the opportunities available for local businesses, students, and other residents. On the Eastern Shore, people have been working very hard on a project to get access to high-speed internet. One provider has expressed some interest, but the area is remote and is going to need the support of the province and other levels of government. My question to the Minister of Service Nova Scotia is, will the province take a leadership role in the project, grow that economy, and commit to funding?
The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member opposite for the question. As the member would know, the Municipal Rural Infrastructure Fund has a component of it that allows for expenditures on high-speed internet. As we said here today, we will support that initiative to the tune of $111 million, the provincial share of $37 million, and we encourage municipalities to bring forward projects such as that so that we can benefit the lives of Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Halifax Atlantic on your first supplementary.
Okay, I think that $37 million is going to have a ways to stretch, but anyway. Computer access is a major issue for the residents in my area, and most people agree that waste really is bad business. The federal CapSite program was a great idea, but it was a startup project, and that money has long dried up. This government has stated that it has a goal of providing more services online, and it means that many government services are now available only to those with both the equipment and the training to access them. But without core funding from any level of government, this valuable, in fact, irreplaceable equipment for many is gathering dust in storerooms, both in my constituency and elsewhere across the province. My question to the Minister of Service Nova Scotia is, what is your government prepared to do to ensure that these expensive sites are in fact maintained and used?
Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question from the honourable member. My guess is that it would be more appropriately asked to the Minister of Economic Development, but I'll attempt to answer the question. We'll continue to support groups and organizations that host access centres. We believe it's a worthwhile initiative, and I believe the federal government will as well, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Halifax Atlantic on your final supplementary.
Actually, I think it wouldn't be continue, but perhaps start. Mr. Speaker, some local businesses in the Eastern Shore have said they're ready to move out if there's no high-speed access in their areas soon. Commercial providers have expressed interest in cost sharing to bring that access to the Eastern Shore, and now the residents are waiting to hear from the government. My question to the Minister is, how much longer will they have to wait for the government to come up with its share, whether out of that $37 million or not, to get this project started?
Minister of Service Nova Scotia, Municipal Relations.
Well, Mr. Speaker, considering I haven't seen an application come forward from any municipality with respect to this, I would say they'd have to wait at least until the municipality moves forward with that initiative. But I'll say to the member opposite that Industry Canada has worked well with the industry to provide connections to high-speed internet. The Municipal Rural Infrastructure Fund also has a component of it that will allow for that to happen. This government supports that initiative. We've included $37 million towards that initiative, and we'll continue to work towards ensuring that all Nova Scotians have access to high-speed internet, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Environment. Residents from Williams Point and Antigonish are concerned about the impact that development on a nearby floodplain is going to have on their homes and any new development. The developer has already started to bring in fill, and some homes have already flooded. Residents worry the local road is in jeopardy. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Minister of Environment is, residents have asked you to intervene to ensure a proper study is done. Why have you not intervened?
Minister of Environment, Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We received that request, and staff is currently reviewing it.
Member for Dartmouth East on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the area in question has never been mapped, but local residents know the land well. They have 71 testimonials indicating that this area floods regularly. In September 2003, the Department of Environment thought an independent study was a good idea and put it in writing to the municipality. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Service Nova Scotia is, what will it take for your department to work with the local municipality to ensure that an independent study is done?
Minister of Service Nova Scotia, Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, land use planning is primarily the responsibility for municipalities. We support and encourage municipalities where and whenever we can, and we will continue to do that, including this municipality, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Dartmouth East on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that's not going to be any comfort to the people that homes have already flooded and those that are waiting for theirs to flood. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, so far over 100 residents have signed a petition to have the area zoned properly. All the residents want to do is ensure that their homes are protected. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Environment is, careful planning does make sense for everyone involved. So when are you going to intervene with this situation?
Minister of Environment, Labour.
Mr. Speaker, my understanding is that the municipality would be responsible for zoning, and all those people who are interested in seeing the zoning change should contact their councillors in the municipal council and pursue that route.
Honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Education. For several weeks now, this government has been spending the budget as an education budget. Today, Mr. Speaker, we are here to tell the people of Nova Scotia exactly what this budget does, or what the government doesn't want them to hear, and that is that nothing could be further from the truth. Today's increase in public education amounts to only $383 per pupil. We are still in last place in Canada on a per-pupil basis funding. My question to the minister is, how can you call this an education budget when you are still spending the least amount per pupil in the country?
Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I'm astounded to hear that party that decimated education have the audacity to stand up in this House and criticize a government that has increased education spending, has made it noticeably better over the 5 years it's been in power.
Now, member for Halifax Clayton Park and the first supplementary.
You wouldn't table the report that says it's noticeably better, would you?
Mr. Speaker, this morning we ranked 10 out of 10 when it came to per-pupil funding, and this afternoon, according to the most recent information from Stats Canada, we are still in 10th place. That's some accomplishment, Mr. Speaker. In fact, this government, even with today's budget, will spend $1,160 less than the Canadian average per pupil. Again, my question to the minister is, why do you continue to tell Nova Scotians that you care about education when, in fact, you have not demonstrated that?
Now, Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, no government in the history of this province has demonstrated a greater commitment to education than the Progressive Conservative government.
Now, member for Halifax Clayton Park and your final supplement.
He knows better than that.
Mr. Speaker, I think that we've already established that an earlier government had proposed a budget of $82.3 million more for public education in a single year. That would be the highest amount ever planned for education. This government, Mr. Speaker, is always and always will be about spin. They will spin a message that is untrue and hope that everyone else will believe it. Well, Mr. Speaker,
Set the record straight.
here's a message right back to the government that Nova Scotians won't fall for the smoke and mirrors PR exercise before them. My question to the minister is, why did you deceive Nova Scotians? Oh, wait. Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. That's out of order.
My question to the minister is, Nova Scotians...
Order, please. Order, please. That statement is out of order. Thank you. Thank you.
Nova Scotians when you told them that this was an education budget?
Now, Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, that is a party that doesn't know numbers, it doesn't know roads, it doesn't know education, it knows third place. That's what it knows, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
Order, please. Now, Minister of Education has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, to find out if it's an education budget, Mr. Speaker, I would refer the honourable member to the Council of Nova Scotia University Presidents, the Nova Scotia School Boards Association, and all of those students and parents whose children are going to benefit from the good things that are contained in this budget.
The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the Minister of Transportation. Mr. Speaker, there's a growing need today for public transportation in our rural communities. And as one example, the residents of the Eastern Shore have counted on Sync's bus service to provide transportation from Sherbrooke to Halifax and return and all points along the way. Yep. But now Sync's bus line has applied to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board to amend their license and drop the service provided to the residents of the Eastern Shore. The hearing date's set for June the 2nd. So my question to the Minister, Mr. Minister, what are you prepared to do for this area and others across the province that need access to public transportation in a desperate way?
Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, the public transportation system in the province of Nova Scotia is competitive, and the bus services will not continue in those areas where the public do not support them.
Honourable Member for Pictou West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are people on the Eastern Shore who really depend upon this service. Seniors who do not drive and need to get to a doctor's appointment. There are parents of children with special needs who rely on the bus service to get their children to appointments with specialists here in the city. So my question to the Minister, what is this government going to do to make sure that people in rural Nova Scotia can access the services of specialists here in Halifax?
Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I think that is beyond the capability of the Department of Transportation, because we have no control over the provision of bus services for people who have to attend medical services. I think that would probably come under the Department of I'm not too sure, Mr. Speaker, who it would come under, but it would not come under the Department of Transportation. I think the Public Utilities Review Board probably controls the public transportation system.
Y'all member Pictou West on your final supplementary.
Problem, Mr. Speaker, he doesn't again have the answer, but there are 13,000 residents along the Eastern Shore. There are 600 businesses that depend upon this bus service, and it doesn't really matter why Sinks is going to drop the service. Local residents want answers from this minister, from this government, and to stand up for their issues. So my question, Mr. Minister, when will this government stand up for issues important to the residents of rural Nova Scotia, including those along the Eastern Shore?
Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, the New Democratic Party of Johnny come latelys as far as looking after rural interests in this province. Mr. Speaker, I can assure the honourable member that this government is committed to supporting the rural part of Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have the luxury of dealing with today's budget. I have to go back to a question that I proposed to the Minister of Transportation last week, because the promises of the future don't look too bright when I have to go back. Mr. Speaker, this time last week I tabled a photograph of a huge sinkhole in Fort Ellis, Colchester County. A car could disappear in the sinkhole, Mr. Speaker. The state of Como Road is simply appalling. Last Tuesday, the Minister of Transportation and Public Works told this House his department was, quote, taking steps to repair that particular problem. Well, Mr. Speaker, I have here another set of photos taken just today, and there's nothing been done with that road. Anyone can see the department has taken no steps whatsoever to repair the hole, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Minister of Transportation and Public Works is, why did the Minister mislead this House last Tuesday when he promised his department was fixing the problem?
Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, it's my understanding that the Department of Transportation was out there today repairing that sinkhole.
Order, please. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, before I came over here today, we had a phone call from a very concerned resident that those cracks and holes are now proceeded completely across the highway. The people are worried that they're afraid to drive that road in the nighttime, that their vehicle will sink into it. Mr. Speaker, the only thing the Department of Transportation has done is put up a few wooden barriers, and some of those wooden barriers are now falling into that sinkhole. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is, you're aware of the problem and you promised it was being fixed. Will you keep your promise?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. In fact, at the conclusion of question period, I'll phone across the department because my understanding was that there was a crew on the job this morning.
The honourable member for Victoria Lakes on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the sinkhole on Como Road in Fort Ellis is a danger to anyone traveling the road. The Honourable Minister says that he's fixing it now, but why should it take 4 weeks? This is the 4th week of a hole that's extremely dangerous to any and all traveling, motoring public, to have the danger of such a hole exist in a common highway. So the Minister You're committing to addressing the problem, and you will see yourself that it will be done today. Can I count on that, Mr. Minister?
Yes.
Now, Minister Transportation and Public Works.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Member Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Environment and Labour. Stephen Little is a small business operator in my constituency who assisted with a cleanup of an oil spill on a property at 2819 Prospect Road. This cleanup was necessary immediately due to its proximity to neighboring homes. On March 4th, Mr. Little wrote to the minister, and I'll table a copy of that letter, asking for assistance with the remaining cost that is still owed to this small business operator of the Prospect Road. Mr. Minister, how are you prepared to assist Mr. Little?
Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are a regulatory department, and we do regulate the cleanup of the environment. However, we are not a funding department, and we really don't have funds available to assist in that kind of a matter.
Member for Timberley Prospect on your first supplementary.
Mr. Minister, as you well know, this spill happened in March of 2002. Environment officials from your department ordered the cleanup, but the family at this location was unable to cover these costs. In future, small businesses like Mr. Little's could refuse to cooperate unless guarantees are given by officials from your department. So my question to the minister, Mr. Speaker, is what is your department proposing to do when your officials order a cleanup and the owners of the property are unable to cover the costs?
Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we've ordered the cleanup, we certainly will look into the issue and see if there is anything available. However, as I said, we are not a funding agency.
Member for Timberley Prospect on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Little and other small business operators that come to the rescue of seniors in the community when a cleanup is necessary to assist in this important issue, they want some clarification. This problem has lingered on for far too long, and Mr. Little still needs payment. So what will the Department of Labor and Environment officials do in future when a small business operator is told, clean this up, and he or she refuses?
Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's important for the member opposite to know that in this particular case, I'll endeavor to look into this and get back to him with an appropriate answer.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, some school children in my riding are in danger every day. Students at the Apple Blossom Mennonite School walk or bicycle to school, yet unlike all the other children in my riding, there are no signs near the school to advise motorists of the presence of school children. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Transportation and Public Works. When will the Minister instruct his department to install warning signs to motorists in order to protect the children?
Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable member is aware of the criteria for putting up signs. I believe that in this particular case that it's a private school and it does not have the population to warrant signs.
Now, member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Safety comes first. Huh?
My investigation of this situation reveals discrimination against the children at the Mennonite School by the Department of Transportation.
Oh.
Members of the Mennonite community don't vote. Their voice is a gentle one in our community, yet they are concerned about the safety of their children. When will the Minister of Transportation do the right thing, instruct his department to place warning signs on the Black Rock Road to protect children?
Now, Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, there are a great many private schools in Nova Scotia, particularly small schools, Mr. Speaker, and the Department of Transportation examines each one of those cases when they apply for signs. If they do not meet the criteria which is established in this province, and it's a common procedure across, a common criteria across this country, that we do not put up signs.
Member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
The position of the Department of Transportation is because the school is private. It can cop out of putting up signs near the school. This in spite of a study which showed excessive speeding on the Black Rock Road, and I will table that. My question to the Minister of Transportation, does he have to wait for a tragic accident or a close call in order to act and protect these children?
Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Speaker, further to this matter, I can certainly send to the honourable member again the criteria. And, Mr. Speaker, we've investigated this particular school, I think, on 4 or 5 occasions to see if we can accommodate the school under the existing criteria, and we cannot.
The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, Pictou County has a long history with shipbuilding over the centuries, and in recent decades, Pictou shipyards in the town of Pictou built many quality vessels, including the present Confederation that plies the Northumberland Strait to and from PEI. And in recent years, fabrication of components for the offshore have been a mainstay. However, at the present time, there's no work at the yard because there are no contracts. More than 100 people laid off. So, Mr. Speaker, these jobs are vital to our rural economy, and I'd like to ask the Premier what he's doing to ensure that these skilled workers are able to get back to work.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I share the member opposite's concern about the plight of the local union who provide the workforce for Pictou shipyards. I was there the day the Confederation was launched, the last significant project in terms of shipbuilding at that particular yard. I recently had an opportunity to meet with senior union people from the yard, and we are doing what we can to explore opportunities for the Pictou shipyard. It is a serious condition and situation, and I commend the member for bringing it to the attention of the House and the government.
The honourable member for Pictou West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too have been contacted with the President of United Steelworkers, Local 4702, at the Pictou shipyards, and a number of other workers who are very concerned there about their lack of work. More than 100 workers have been without employment since last summer. Their EI benefits are about to run out, and soon many of those skilled workers will have to leave our province and go elsewhere. So, Mr. Speaker, time is running out for many of these workers. And again, to the Premier, this now is an urgent situation. Mr. Premier, will you give this your urgent attention?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, and I will guarantee the member opposite that it is on my front burner. As a matter of fact, I made a call relative to this particular problem today. But I want to point out to the members of the House the discrepancy in this question and the one that was proposed by the Leader of the Opposition, who was criticizing the government for providing a good opportunity for large corporations to create employment in Nova Scotia. And then we have a backbencher saying, what can you do to put my people to work? Well, Mr. Speaker, we will put those people to work.
The honourable member for Pictou West on your final supplementary. Order, please. The honourable member for Pictou West on his final supplementary.
Well,
Protect small business.
Pictou shipyards is really a Pictou shipyards, Mr. Speaker, is really a small local industry that's providing a lot of employment to our local area. But I'm glad to hear the commitment of the Premier and this government to helping out. And because this industry does have, or this government has an important role to play. They own part of the shipyard still through the Marine Railway and other components at the yard. And as we know, jobs are scarce in rural Nova Scotia. We need our shipyard back to work. So through you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Premier, will you stand up for rural Nova Scotia? Will you stand up for our Pictou shipyards?
Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And through you, I can reassure the member opposite that we are working on the file. We are aware of the problem, and we will do what we can to find suitable work for those who work at the Pictou shipyards. It is under lease to a large corporation, and I believe that by supporting business, we can put people to work. That's why we do what we do as Conservatives.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker,
In the document Your Health Matters, government's committed to releasing the first annual minister's report to patients on wait lists, and it made that commitment for the fall of 2003. Well, guess what, Mr. Speaker? We waited for the report, and it was late. It arrived in March 2004, and it shared very little information with respect to wait times. Despite the fact that it's now been more than a year since the last report, the public has yet to hear from the minister on wait lists, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that brags that they are addressing wait times, yet they fail to produce a report that will reassure Nova Scotians that they are actually understanding the pressure points and have things well in hand. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Minister of Health is, when can Nova Scotians expect the next report on wait times to be released, and what are you hiding, Mr. Minister?
Now, Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, we're hiding a lot of good news, and the report will be out shortly.
Now, member for Glace Bay, on your first supplementary, about 45 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, the minister wants to wait longer for the wait times report, Mr. Speaker. I stated earlier the last report that he released was, to say the least, scant in detail, Mr. Speaker. In fact, many would consider it nothing more than a great big glossy public relations document which simply included wait times for areas the government had already made a commitment to addressing. So, Mr. Speaker, would the minister please confirm whether this year's report, whenever it's tabled, will incorporate more detail with respect to wait times than last year's report? And, Mr. Speaker, how long do we have to wait for the wait times report?
Order, please. We'll have to wait for another day of question period, I guess. Time allotted for question period has expired. Orders of the day, government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I move that you now leave the chair and the House resolve the committee of the whole House on bills.
Agreed. Carried.
Recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 146?
Call Bill number 146.
Yeah.
No. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. Shall the clauses as amended carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, will you please call Bill number 148, the Justice Administration Amendment 2005 Act?
Bill number 148. The question has been called. Shall the title carry? Shall the clauses carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 152, the Liquor Control Act?
Bill number 152. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called for. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried. I'll recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill 158, the Paramedics Act?
Bill number 158. Question has been called. Shall the title carry? Shall the clauses carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I'll recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 159, the University St. Anne College Act?
Bill number 159. Question has been called. Shall the title carry? Shall the clauses carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 160, the University College of Cape Breton Act?
Bill number 160. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. Shall the title carry? Shall the clauses carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, please call Bill number 161, the Special Places Protection Act.
Bill number 161. Question has been called. Shall the title carry? Shall the clauses carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried.
Chairman, would you please call Bill number 117, the Emergency Health Services Act?
Bill number 117. Is the House ready for the question? The Honourable Member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a few brief comments on this bill. A little bit disappointed today with the progression of this bill, that we are entertaining it and talking about it in this session. Because it was my understanding that this bill, which was introduced in the last session of the House, Mr. Chair, that it was a very important bill, something that needed to take place many years ago, and I stated that to this House about the importance of having this bill before we seen the changes go on in this province when it came to emergency health services in Nova Scotia. And I think one of the main reasons we didn't talk about it in the last session, Mr. Speaker, is because some of the interventions from some of the government members with concerns in their community. But, Mr. Speaker, one of the reasons I'm disappointed is that with this important bill that we needed to take care of, the members of the government, and especially certain MLAs for the region, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, we're playing politics with this piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker. And with the, I couldn't believe that the Minister of Health would allow this to happen, and especially the Premier, a physician in this province, to allow one of his members to play politics when it concerns the health and safety of all Nova Scotians. So with those comments, Mr. Speaker, I do support this piece of legislation, but I would have thought the government would have seen fit to introduce and pass this piece of legislation in the last session, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Is the House ready for the question? Question's been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, would you, we have a private and local bill, and just one moment, please. The bill number 134, the Yarmouth Marketing and Promotions Levy Act.
Bill number 134. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried.
Mr. Chairman, I move that your committee to now rise and report these bills.
There now.
Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House on Bills reports.
Committee is met and considers the following bills.
namely 146, 148, 152, 158, 159, 160, 161, 117, and 134. The Chairman's been instructed to recommend them each with, to the favorable consideration of the House without amendment.
Agreed? Agreed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, that concludes the government business for today, and I would ask that you call on the House Leader for the official opposition to detail the business for tomorrow.
The Honourable Member for Core Irish Passage on tomorrow's hours and order of business.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow the House will sit from 2 p.m. until 6 p.m. After daily routine and question period, we will be calling Bill number 157 and resolution number 3373. I have a copy of that for both other parties as well, so they can get a copy of the resolution. It was a resolution from yesterday. I have a copy of it. So that will be Bill number 157 and resolution number 3373. And I so move adjournment until tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Motion is the House adjourned to 2 p.m. tomorrow. Is agreed? All in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. House adjourned to 2 p.m. House adjourned to 2 p.m. tomorrow.